All right, let's talk more on this then. We take the discussion further. We're now joined via Zoom by tennis expert Bruce Davidson. A very good afternoon to you, Bruce. Thanks very much for joining us here on SABC News this afternoon.
Thanks, Flo. Good to be on the show. Hello to the viewers.
So I've been following this with keen interest, I must say. So let's talk about where we are right now. So Novak Djokovic wins his appeal against the decision to refuse his visa ahead of the Australian Open, but it doesn't necessarily end there, does it? So I'm hearing that it can still be revoked by way of a ministerial power despite that ruling. Let's talk about where he can go, what's happening. Is he allowed now to practice as he has been asking? What happens now?
Well, the first thing is, as you rightly said, he was moved 30 minutes after that judgment was made this morning out of this really dodgy hotel. And that's the word I would use. I know the hotel well. It's only like a 2-star hotel here in South Africa. And they've moved into a much better facility where there is a gym, there is a court, and there is practice facilities. So he's sleeping right now, but I'm sure that he's going to be up bright and early and he's going to be onto that court. Obviously holding thumbs, like you said, in case Minister Hawke, who is the minister that can actually change things dramatically if he insists on that visa being cancelled and deporting Novak Djokovic. I doubt he's going to do that. I don't think he's going to go against the law. Already, I think the government have a bit of mud on their face after a medical exemption was given by Tennis Australia as well as the Victorian state. And then obviously it was revoked, and all of a sudden now the court of law goes against their own country and rules in favour of Djokovic. So this is a very interesting turn of events, and I'm sure that the fans that love Djokovic, and as well as the Tennis Australia Open, are delighted that it's all happening.
You know, I was watching some international news earlier on today, and, you know, one of the conversations, and they had a tennis expert like yourself, Bruce, and what he said was, you know, if Djokovic had just taken the vaccine, none of this would have happened. He's in the wrong. He should have just taken the vaccine. I mean, where do you see the fault lying here? I mean, I hear you talking about, you know, the Australian authorities being to blame, and is that really where the blame should be put at this time? Because they allowed him in. They could have just said to him from the beginning, don't even bother coming to Australia in the first place. But they did. They let him come in. They then make this #1 tennis star stay in a dodgy hotel, which, I mean, has really sent his fans off. You know, who is to blame? Who signed off that thing that says, yes, in fact, come through. You've got the exemption. We accept it. Here's the visa. And then suddenly, no, actually, you don't.
Well, it's interesting. 9 months ago, I was actually at a press conference where the Prime Minister of Australia made it very clear to all players and officials that are coming to the Australian Open that they had to be double vaxxed. And that was standard from the Prime Minister himself. But he did say something that was very interesting as he concluded his statement, in that unless you have a medical exemption, we will consider you coming into the country. So Djokovic, we know that he doesn't want to be vaxxed. He isn't vaxxed, and he stands up for not being vaxxed. He went the medical exemption route because he said the Prime Minister gave that option. And the state of Victoria, which is like a provincial state in South Africa, as well as Tennis Australia, who are the custodians of the sport in Australia, they both got independent medical panels, one each, to look at his application. And at the end of the day, it was given a thumbs up by both those. And then all of a sudden, you know, he arrives and he can't go into the country.
Yeah, you know, we've all been sort of focused on Novak Djokovic, but there's other things happening as well, isn't there, with regards to the Australian Open? I'd actually heard, and I wasn't sure who this particular tennis player was, and I was hearing it in passing that a particular tennis player had actually just left Australia as well, one of the female tennis players, and that there'd been also drama there. But of course, everybody's really very much focused on Djokovic. So anything else that's happening with regards to Australian Open has kind of been put on the side. What information do you have, and other drama that's linked to the Australian Open at this time?
Well, Flo, this court order has really thrown the cat amongst the pigeons, because there's 26 players that are sitting on the fence that were actually waiting to find out the outcome of this court order. So we could have quite a few appeals now to players who have been told they cannot enter Australia. There is still 1 week to go before the Australian Open, and it gives enough time for a player to get to Australia and maybe get 2 or 3 days practice in before they play. So I think the drama has only really started, to be quite honest. Yeah. And I don't know how Djokovic is going to be able to stand in front of an Australian crowd and keep composed, because 98% of the population in Australia are vaxxed. So they are anti him having been allowed into the country, and they are the majority of the crowds that are going to be there. It's going to be very, very interesting. And if he wins the Australian Open, I'm going to call him superhero.
I mean, let's talk about, what this then means. I mean, whichever way this goes, something happens, right? It sends a strong message either way, whether it's for the people that don't want to be vaccinated, or the people that are pro vaccination. And I'm wondering, how this will play out. I mean, if he plays, I mean, let's also just talk about his performance too. I'm thinking, if I'm a sportsman and I'm a competitive sportsman like this, I'll certainly be coming in guns blazing and possibly winning this championship. I heard one of the tennis players who's likely to play against him saying, listen, I actually don't want to play against this guy, because I'm thinking when he gets on that court, he's going to be so angry that he's going to beat us, beat all of us, because of the way that he's been treated. And I thought that it was quite an interesting comment to make. So of course it will affect play, whether good or bad, but also just in terms of sporting in general. I mean, does this mean that policies will be amended, depending on which way this then plays out?
Well, I think that lots of lessons have been learned from what's happened.
Yeah.
And I heard from Craig Tiley, who is the tournament director of the Australian Open, as well as the tournament, the CEO of Tennis Australia, that no less than 27 national, international sporting federations have put requests through to get feedback on the outcome. So it obviously is going to be a very interesting lesson learned for all sporting goats around the world, because this virus isn't going away fast, and we know that there are very strong humanitarian standpoints against the vaccines, including sportsmen, and it's how they managed. It's just interesting how this has happened in Australia, whose rules are probably the most stringent of all countries in the world.
All right, Bruce, a pleasure talking to you. Let's all wait and see how this all plays. So, of course, the Australian Open's kicking off on the 27th of January. So still a bit of time until we see how this will play out, right?
Yes, it is. There's a tournament taking place right now for the men and women as a warm-up, and then we go, and the qualifying is taking place for the Australian Open, and the tournament proper is a week today. So there is some time out, and we're just waiting in anticipation for the news from the Minister's office whether he's going to allow Djokovic's visa and the court ruling to stand.
All right, Bruce, thanks so much for your time. Hope to chat to you closer to that when it all actually starts.